Breaking news, Raider Nation. The Las Vegas Raiders just wrapped up their preseason matchup against the San Francisco 49ers, and let me tell you, this game spoke volumes about where this team stands heading into the season. Now, preseason scores don't tell the whole story. Sure, the Raiders didn't come out on top, but the real value was in what we saw from the players on the field. And trust me, there were plenty of moments worth getting excited about. Before we dive deeper into the latest updates, do me a quick favor, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and don't forget to smash the bell icon so you never miss the freshest Raiders news and breakdowns. Alright, now let's get back into it. The Raiders' defense took the field first after deferring the coin toss, but what really caught everyone's attention was the offense. The first team unit came out with purpose, running nearly 17 plays over 2 series and putting points on the board with both a touchdown and a field goal. That's the kind of early season rhythm you want to see. And how about Geno Smith? From the very first snap, he looked locked in. First play of the game, boom. A 28-yard strike down the sideline to Brock Bowers, who absolutely elevated over the 49ers secondary to make the grab. That's the kind of chemistry you want to see building in August. We also saw the ground game show some flashes. Ash Gentry picked up solid yards on a couple of carries, keeping the chains moving. And while Smith tried to connect deep with Dante Thornton a couple of times without success, you could tell the confidence was there, and that trust between quarterback and receiver is something to keep an eye on as the season gets closer. Let's talk about Dante Thornton for a second, because this guy has the tools to be something special. Watching him run routes, you can see the polish. The way he comes out of his stance, stacks a corner, and creates separation. It's smooth, it's sharp, and it's the kind of detail that doesn't always get noticed on the stat sheet. Honestly, if he had played at a powerhouse like Alabama or LSU, I think we'd be talking about him as a first-round pick. That's how good his fundamentals look. Now, Geno Smith clearly sees it too. Even though a couple of deep shots to Thornton didn't connect, the intent was there. That trust matters, especially this early in the season. On one of those drives, with the Niners sitting back in what looked like a cover 2, Geno dumped it down to Ashton Gentry. That play ended with Gentry taking a brutal hit, the kind you don't want to see your running back absorbing. He walked straight to the sideline and into the medical tent, which was definitely concerning. On third down, Smith checked it off again, this time to Moser, who couldn't quite shake his defender. And that, to me, highlights a bigger question about the Raiders' backfield rotation. I'll be real with you, I'm not sold on Raheem Moser. His style feels limited. He struggles to make defenders miss in one-on-one situations, and too often he goes down on first contact. Sure, he had success in Miami, but that was with Mike McDaniel, one of the best run game designers in the league, scheming plays to perfection. That's a very different setup than what we're seeing here. On the flip side, someone like Chris Collier deserves more of a look. He only had 4 carries, but he turned those into 26 yards. Every run felt decisive, every cut had purpose, and he consistently moved the chains. I know he was playing against backups, but you can't ignore that kind of consistency. Right now, he looks more explosive and reliable than some of the vets ahead of him on the depth chart. If you look at the Raiders' backfield, one thing is crystal clear. They need runners who can create something out of nothing. Guys who can shake a defender, break a tackle, and turn a busted play into a positive gain. That could be Sincere McCormick, Dylan Lobb, or even Chris Collier, but for me, Raheem Moser just doesn't fit that mold. He's steady, sure, but he doesn't bring that spark this offense needs. After settling for a field goal on the opening drive, the defense gave the Raiders a real shot of momentum. With the 49ers' backup quarterback under center, Jeremy Chinn stepped up in a big way. Dropping back into coverage, reading the play perfectly, and laying out for a diving interception. That's exactly the kind of playmaking energy this defense has been searching for. And the offense wasted no time cashing in. The Raiders only needed to go 41 yards, but they made it count. Ashton Gentry, who had left earlier after taking a big hit, came right back and ran like he had a point to prove. On one carry, he bulldozed straight through a 49ers safety fighting for a starting spot. 13 yards later, Gentry was standing over his opponent, showing exactly the kind of physicality fans want to see. What excites me about Gentry isn't just the power, it's the variety in his game. He can stiff arm, lower his shoulder, or hit you with a juke in the backfield. You can tell he's still raw, still learning, but the flashes are undeniable. This is a rookie with real upside, and it feels like just the beginning. That drive ended the way it should, points on the board. Michael Mayer hauled in an 11-yard grab to put the Raiders on the doorstep, and then Gentry finished the job. It took him 2 tries at the goal line, but on the second attempt he punched it in for his first touchdown in the silver and black. Preseason or not, that's a milestone worth celebrating. Here's the thing about Ashton Gentry. The stat line doesn't even tell the full story. He officially finished with 7 carries for 33 yards, which averages out to just under 5 per attempt. But when you remember that 2 of those carries came from the 1-yard line, where the defense is stacked and expecting the run, the efficiency looks a whole lot better. On his first few touches, he was pushing past 6 yards per carry. That's the kind of production you want to see. But it wasn't just Gentry who stood out. The entire first-team offense came out sharp. Right from the opening play, when Geno Smith connected with Brock Bowers, you could feel the rhythm. Even the offensive line showed a mean streak. Dylan Parham in particular was finishing blocks and setting the tone. What impressed me most, though, was how solid that line looked in limited snaps. The Raiders didn't keep their starters out there long, but in the time they were on the field, they gave Smith time to work and open lanes in the run game. No glaring breakdowns, no obvious weak spots. That's the kind of stability this team has been searching for up front. It feels almost certain now that Jordan Meredith will lock down the center job, with Paris Johnson Jr. stepping in at right guard. Alex Kappa is still dealing with his rib injury, so until he's back, that's the unit the Raiders are likely rolling with. And based on what we saw, that's not a bad thing. Of course, context matters. San Francisco wasn't at full strength. Fred Warner, Nick Bosa, and rookie first-rounder Laiota Lada weren't on the field. But let's be real, the Niners still had plenty of starters out there in the secondary and along the defensive line. It wasn't a cupcake matchup, and yet the Raiders' line held its ground and answered a lot of questions people had coming into this game. So the offense checked some big boxes. Now the real test, and what we need to dive into next, is the defense. And after that, we've got to talk about Aiden O'Connell, because my feelings on him are starting to shift in a big way. When the 49ers opened the game on offense, they wasted no time testing the Raiders' defense. Brock Purdy led a 12-play, 61-yard drive that chewed up clock and marched right into the red zone. Credit to the Raiders for tightening up when it mattered most, but that series showed some cracks that can't be ignored. One play in particular stood out. Jermaine Pratt sniffed out a run-pass option, jumped into the throwing lane, and forced Purdy to adjust. The quarterback tried to compensate, but the ball sailed too far ahead of his receiver. That was a break for Las Vegas, but it didn't erase the chunk gain San Francisco had already piled up along the way. Now here's where the narrative gets tricky. The instant reaction online was, the Raiders' secondary is terrible. But football isn't that simple. On some of those completions, the issue wasn't coverage, it was the underneath defenders not getting enough depth in their drops. Take that 3rd and 18, for example. Normally, you expect to get off the field in that situation. Instead, the Niners dialed up a dagger concept, one receiver stretching the defense deep, another cutting in underneath, and converted. That's less about cornerbacks losing matchups and more about linebackers not sinking far enough to take the throw away. There were some bright spots in coverage, sure, but overall the 49ers moved the ball with ease. Ricky Pearsall burned them for gains of 14 and 21 yards. Demarcus Robinson added a 13-yard grab, and Purdy looked comfortable picking his spots. And remember, San Francisco wasn't even at full strength. Their starting left tackle and guard were both out. George Kittle didn't play, and Christian McCaffrey was nowhere near the field. That's what makes this concerning. The Raiders gave up a long, efficient drive to a short-handed offense. Yes, they held in the red zone, but that won't be enough when the real bullets fly in the regular season. Here's the reality. The 49ers were rolling out backups at several key spots, even at running back, yet the Raiders' defense couldn't immediately shut them down with a quick 3-and-out. That's disappointing, no question. But it's also preseason football, and that means you're not seeing the full defensive playbook. Patrick Graham did dial up more blitz this week, sending corners and linebackers after the quarterback, but the Raiders are still holding back. They're not going to reveal the exotic stuff, the disguised coverages, the pre-snap looks that flip post-snap into something completely different. That's the kind of chess they'll save for when the games actually count. Even with a simplified scheme, there were moments that stood out. Max Crosby reminded everyone why he's the heartbeat of this defense. On one play, the Niners tried running outside zone to the right. Crosby knifed inside, swam past Colton McKivitz, and buried the running back for a 5-yard loss. Pure dominance. The very next snap, San Francisco tried running the other way, but Tyree Wilson set the edge perfectly while Adam Butler beat his man inside. Crosby crashed down from the backside, and suddenly the 49ers were staring at another negative play. Back-to-back losses, -8 yards total. That's how you win in the trenches. What's encouraging is how much better the Raiders looked against the run compared to last week. Players stayed disciplined in their assignments, edges were set, and gaps were filled. That's growth. And when San Francisco got near the red zone, the defense tightened up again. On first down, tight coverage forced an incompletion. On second, Purdy scrambled and only managed a yard. On third, with Tyree Wilson collapsing the pocket, the ball went incomplete again. That's exactly the type of resilience you want to see building early. One of the most impressive defensive snaps came when Tyree Wilson, lined up inside at the 3 technique, bull rushed the left guard straight into Brock Purdy and actually got a hit on him as the ball came out. That's the kind of disruption you want to see from a young pass rusher. And overall, the Raiders' first-team defense showed progress. They weren't perfect, but compared to last week, the unit looked sharper, more disciplined, and a little more confident. Wilson, in particular, flashed in ways people have been waiting for. He set the edge on one play, pressured the quarterback on another, and even mixed in some inside reps. Critics questioned his bend and explosiveness after the first preseason game, but this time he showed flashes of both. No, he's not all the way back yet, but the signs were encouraging. Defensive front wasn't just Wilson. Malcolm Koonce worked a nice stunt with him, looping underneath and delivering a hit on the quarterback. Max Crosby, as always, brought his relentless energy. You can feel that the pass rush is starting to stack plays together. That's exactly what this team needs. On the offensive side, there are plenty of reasons to be optimistic. Brock Bowers is already looking like a reliable weapon. Michael Mayer chipped in with a key grab, and Ashton Gentry once again ran with power and vision. Jakobi Meyers was steady as ever, moving the chains with short yardage catches. The one player I'd love to see more involved, Trey Tucker. He only had 1 catch for 6 yards, but his speed is too valuable to keep bottled up. Stretching the field with him could open up everything else. Geno Smith, meanwhile, was efficient, 6 of 8 for 55 yards, and he led a touchdown drive that looked smooth from start to finish. That's what you want out of a preseason start, sharp execution, no wasted motion. As for the defense behind the front line, we saw some flashes there too. Jermaine Pratt disrupted a pass with his awareness. Jamal Adams and Darnay Holmes each made an impact on well-timed blitz, and Chris Smith was everywhere, racking up 7 tackles. The coaches clearly wanted to test him with heavy snaps, and he delivered. Tommy Eichenberg also impressed with his range, flying around the field for 7 tackles of his own. The broadcast even pointed out how much he's grown from year 1 to year 2, and watching him tonight it showed. All in all, both the offensive and defensive units showed improvement. Not perfect, but enough progress to keep fans encouraged heading into the next stage of preseason. Some guys just look like they've taken another step, and that was the case again this week. Chris Smith piled up 7 tackles, continuing to show that his Week 1 performance wasn't a fluke. Charles Snowden chipped in with a couple of tackles for loss, and then there was Andre Carter. Carter's sack was flat-out explosive. The burst, the twitch, the inside move, it all came together in a way that makes you wonder if he's finally tapping into that potential scouts raved about years ago. Remember, he was once projected as a first-rounder because of raw tools, but he never fully put it together. Tonight, though, he looked every bit the part of a dangerous pass rusher. Not everyone had a clean night, though. Thomas Booker stood out for the wrong reason. On a run play, he got reached badly, which opened the lane for a 20-yard gain. That kind of breakdown is costly. To his credit, he flashed some hustle on other snaps, but being just an effort player isn't enough. Defensive tackles can't afford to get washed out of their run fits. If he wants consistent snaps, he's got to tighten up that part of his game. Now, shifting to the quarterback situation, Aiden O'Connell continues to raise concerns. He's thrown 3 interceptions already, and beyond the turnovers, the bigger issue is his lack of mobility. When the pocket collapses, he doesn't have the ability to extend plays with his legs. Third and long situations are a nightmare. Instead of buying time for routes to develop, he's forced into short throws or risky heaves. That kind of limitation doesn't just stall drives, it puts extra strain on the offensive line and caps the offense's potential. It's becoming clear. If O'Connell wants to stick, he's got to show more than just pocket passing. Right now, defenses know he won't improvise, and that predictability is dangerous. Here's the challenge with Aiden O'Connell. When he's under center, defensive linemen know they can rush without fear. Containment isn't a priority because O'Connell isn't going to punish you with his legs. If there's a crease, he's not slipping through it for a first down. Compare that to someone like Geno Smith or Cam Miller. If you give them space, they'll take off, and that threat alone slows down a pass rush. But O'Connell doesn't have that weapon, and it makes him easier to defend. On top of that, the decision-making has been shaky. He threw another interception today and nearly tossed a second. One came on a blitz look, slot receiver breaks to the outside, and O'Connell fires it without recognizing the corner lurking underneath. That's the kind of bait defenses are already starting to use against him. We saw it last week, too, when Seattle's coach disguised coverage and tricked him into a pick. Now here's the twist. Despite the mistakes, O'Connell still has value. He's not the guy you're building your offense around, but as a backup, he can hold down a spot while continuing to develop. It doesn't make sense to just cut bait when he's still learning the speed and complexity of the NFL game. On the flip side, Cam Miller has flashed upside. He's mobile, he's aggressive, and he showed again that he can move the ball late in games. On his second-to-last drive, he strung together completions and runs that set up a field goal, giving the Raiders the lead. But with young quarterbacks, it's never all good. The final drive showed that 2 sacks, then a forced throw into a dagger concept where the safety was sitting all along. It was predetermined, and it cost him. Interception, game over. That's the reality right now. O'Connell is steady but limited. Miller is exciting but raw. The Raiders are caught in that tension between safe and risky, and figuring out how to balance it is going to shape the quarterback depth chart moving forward. The 49ers sealed the win with a late field goal, but for the Raiders, the final score isn't the real story. What matters is the growth we're seeing and sometimes not seeing from their quarterbacks. Cam Miller looked every bit the rookie tonight. There were flashes of poise, but also the kind of mistakes you'd expect from a young player still learning NFL speed. That's exactly why the Raiders need to be careful with him. Throwing him into the fire too soon could do more harm than good. Let him sit, let him learn, and let him make his mistakes in low-pressure moments. If you're blowing out an opponent, sure, give him some snaps. But asking him to rescue a season if Geno Smith goes down, that's unfair to Miller and risky for the team. That's where Aiden O'Connell comes in. He's far from perfect, predictable, limited with his legs, and sometimes baited into mistakes, but he's steady enough to manage a game or two if needed. He's the kind of quarterback who won't carry you through a month-long stretch, but if you need one drive to set up a field goal, he can give you that chance. Looking beyond the Raiders, it was interesting to see Carter Bradley get snaps for the 49ers. He didn't complete a pass, both attempts were dropped, but still helped steer them to that game-winning field goal. For a guy just recently cut by the Raiders, seeing him land on his feet and fight for a roster spot is a win in itself. So yes, the Raiders lost, but the real takeaway is where they stand at quarterback. Geno is the anchor, O'Connell is the safety net, and Miller is the project. The balance between patience and pressure with that group will tell us a lot about how this season unfolds.